Picture this for a second. You're trapped nearly 350 feet below the surface of the freezing ocean. You're inside a massive, dark steel tube. There is absolutely no sunlight, there's no way out, and the oxygen is rapidly running out. With every passing second, you know the end is getting closer. The world above knows exactly where you are, but nobody can save you.
That absolute nightmare, that was the reality for the crew of the Russian submarine, the Kursk. Those haunting words on the screen right now, they were written in the pitch dark by Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov. He was an officer trapped in the aftermath of a massive, catastrophic explosion. And this note, which was found long after the disaster, proved a truly horrifying truth. Some of the crew didn't die instantly in the blast. They actually survived, and they waited.
Okay, let's dive into this. In today's explainer, we're unpacking the Kursk Disaster, which remains one of the deadliest submarine tragedies in modern history. We're going to break down the precise technical failures that doomed the sub, the frankly agonizing timeline of the Russian naval response, and the massive geopolitical shockwave this sent across the globe. Because this isn't just a story about a broken machine, It's really a story about institutional secrecy, government failure, and a massive turning point for post-Soviet identity.
Section 1. Pride of the Russian Fleet. Now, to truly get how something like this could even happen, we have to travel back to August of 2000. Russia was in this really crucial period of rebuilding right after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Their military had definitely weakened over the previous decade, so the country desperately needed to prove to the world, and honestly to itself, that it was still a global superpower. And the ultimate symbol of that strength, their nuclear submarine fleet.
And the absolute crown jewel of that entire fleet was the K-141 Kursk. Just think about the sheer scale of this thing for a minute. At nearly 500 feet long, this nuclear-powered behemoth was one of the largest, most advanced submarines in the entire Russian Navy. We're talking heavily armed with powerful torpedoes and missiles designed to take out whole enemy fleets. In fact, Russian commanders and military experts were so confident in its engineering that they considered it practically unsinkable.
Section 2. Anatomy of the Disaster. So that so-called invincibility is put to the test on August 12, 2000. The Kursk is out participating in a major naval exercise in the icy Barents Sea. This wasn't just some routine drill either. It involved several warships and submarines. It was meant to be a massive global display of Russian military might. You've got 118 highly experienced crew members on board. But deep inside the torpedo compartment, a fatal chain of events was already starting.
And this brilliantly, tragically illustrates exactly what went wrong. It all started with just one faulty practice torpedo. This torpedo began leaking highly concentrated hydrogen peroxide fuel. And when that fuel leaked, it triggered a violently fast chemical reaction. Literally moments later, a massive explosion just completely rips through the front compartment of the submarine. This blast was so unbelievably powerful that it actually registered on seismic equipment miles and miles away. Instant chaos, instant fire.
The timeline from here moves incredibly fast. At exactly 11:28 a.m., that first explosion immediately kills the crew members stationed up front. But then, just over 2 minutes later, a second, infinitely more catastrophic explosion hits. We're talking about a blast equivalent to several tons of TNT, likely caused by all the other torpedoes detonating inside the sub at once. It just utterly shredded the interior compartments. And moments after that, this colossal vessel simply crashes down to the seabed, 350 feet below.
Section 3. Trapped in Compartment 9. So, the vast majority of those 118 men died instantly in those blasts. But as this immense, ruined submarine settles onto the ocean floor, the violent shaking stops, and it's replaced by this claustrophobic, pitch-black silence. Because in the very back of the submarine, right in Compartment 9, some of the sailors were actually still breathing.
We know for an absolute fact that at least 23 sailors survived those initial explosions. They retreated to the 9th compartment and grouped together in the dark. And the only reason we know this exact number and where they were is because of Lieutenant Kolesnikov. Sitting there in total darkness, he somehow managed to document their horrific reality on a piece of paper. It provided this devastating emotional anchor and the only definitive record of the men who survived the initial crash.
Just try to wrap your head around the sensory nightmare these 23 men were dealing with. The sub has completely lost power. Every single emergency system is dead, zero communication with the surface, the water creeping in around them is literally freezing, the air is rapidly filling with toxic smoke and carbon dioxide, and parts of the sub are slowly flooding. But they tried to stay calm. They conserved their oxygen, and they just listened to the ocean, waiting for the rescue team they were so sure was coming.
Section 4, the failed naval response. Now, up on the surface, Russian naval commanders quickly realized the Kursk had stopped responding. But what followed was not some swift, highly coordinated rescue op. Instead, it was this totally agonizing timeline of delays, driven by confusion and this deeply ingrained institutional instinct to just keep things hidden.
The contrast we see here is just staggering. On the government side, their approach was all about state image. Handle it internally, keep it quiet, and firmly reject any foreign aid. They needed to project this image of total self-reliance. But the grim reality? Their own specialized rescue subs were failing to dock with the Kursk's escape hatch over and over again because of technical glitches, bad weather, and terrible visibility. They just didn't have the capability to pull this off in time. Yet, they delayed accepting help from British and Norwegian teams until it was way, way too late.
So the crucial point is that when you're dealing with submarines, time is a luxury you absolutely do not have. Look at these unique dangers: fire, flooding, toxic gases. Unlike a surface ship where you can, jump into a lifeboat, any small mistake made underwater turns fatal in seconds. There is nowhere to run. A completely competent immediate response is literally the only difference between life and death. The delays up on the surface basically sealed the fate of the men trapped below. Tragically, we know how the wait ends. While nobody knows the exact play-by-play of those final moments, investigators concluded it was likely one of two terrifying scenarios for the men in Compartment 9. As the carbon dioxide rose and the freezing cold set in, either freezing seawater eventually reacted with chemicals inside to spark a deadly fire, or the oxygen-generating cartridges they were relying on suddenly triggered a massive flash fire that just instantly burned up the remaining breathable air. One by one, trapped under the sea, they were gone.
Section 5. Shattered post-Soviet identity. When the agonizing truth finally came out, the shockwave went way beyond the Barents Sea. We really have to zoom out to the global stage here, because all across Russia, this agonizing wait had been playing out on the nightly news. It started as intense public fear and quickly mutated into profound, incredibly vocal outrage. See, the Kursk disaster transformed. It wasn't just a tragic accident anymore. It became this glaring, undeniable symbol of corruption and the dangerous decline of post-Soviet military systems. Families were furious, demanding answers. The whole country watched these highly emotional, televised confrontations between grieving mothers and top government officials. Even President Putin caught fierce criticism for staying on vacation during those crucial early days. It just completely exposed the deep, deep cracks in the state's military facade.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the concept of institutional secrecy. Prioritizing the state's image and information control over actual transparency, even when human lives are on the line. The government didn't refuse foreign aid at first because of logistics, they refused it to control the narrative and project power. And that decision fundamentally fractured the public's trust in the Russian military apparatus. People suddenly realized that the systems meant to protect their soldiers were deeply compromised by pride.
Months later, during this massively dangerous salvage op, recovery teams actually raised the silent sub from the ocean floor. And inside, they found the scattered personal belongings of the crew, right there in the dark where they had waited. And of course, they found Lieutenant Kolesnikov's note, hauntingly cementing the timeline for history. They were alive, and they waited. The emotional toll that realization took on the recovery teams, and really the whole world watching, was just immeasurable.
Today, the wreck of the Kursk stands as one of the darkest moments in modern naval history. Yes, it forced some improvements in submarine safety, but it left behind these cultural scars that have honestly never healed. It leaves us with a chilling reminder of how fragile human survival is beneath the ocean. But more importantly, it leaves us with a deeply unsettling question. What happens when a nation's desire to project its own military strength completely overshadows the value of the lives actually serving within it?